My guest at this time is Virginia Republican Delegate Nick Freitas. He joins me fresh off the House of Delegates voting on a tax bill designed to provide relief to Virginians who are now paying higher state and local taxes as a result of the federal tax reform of 2017. We also want to get his thoughts on what else has been debated so far in this session and what he thinks of the controversies engulfing all three statewide elected officials. And Delegate Freitas, thanks so much for your time today.
No, pleasure to be on. Thanks, Greg.
Well, you literally just came off the floor where there was this major vote on the tax relief. What happened?
Well, the first time first of all, let me back up a little bit. We've had various tax plans in the House and the Senate. The one thing that's been very, very unified on the Republican Party in both chambers is that we really looked at this from the perspective that this money needs to go back to the taxpayers. This is not some sort of windfall profit from a new tax or whatnot. This is all about conforming with the federal tax code, which is the adjustments that were made with the Trump tax cuts, in such a way to where Virginia citizens actually realize those tax cuts instead of getting just slammed with new increases in state taxes. So that from the very beginning, we have all been about this has to go back to the taxpayer. Governor Northam was all about how do we spend this. And what's amazing is that he kept using the language very, very carefully. He would say, we need to bring tax relief. But what he was really doing was he wasn't engaging in a tax cut. He was engaging in government spending. He was engaging in wealth transfers. So he was going to take money from those people that had paid the taxes, and he was going to give it to other people. And we just outright rejected that. So there was obviously some debates that went on with respect to those two approaches. Today, we needed 80 votes. This is very critical. We needed 80 votes for the taxes to apply now for this tax policy, not only apply to 2019, but for 2018 as well, so that people were not sitting around not sure how to fill out their taxes this year. And the first time we brought it up, we thought we had an agreement, and then it dies on the floor. And so we all have to go back into recess and figure out what exactly is going on. And I got to tell you, it was very frustrating because we had to sit through some floor speeches where we actually had members on the other side accusing us of being racist because of the tax proposal we were supporting. And again, all our tax proposal did was ensure that the money went back to taxpayers. There were some discussions that took place. We came back up on the floor, and we actually were able to pass it out. I think the final vote was 95-4. So I'm very pleased that this is going to go forward. It's the bill that we wanted. We've gotten just about everything that we wanted out of the tax plan that we originally submitted. So I do think it's a big victory for the Commonwealth.
Follow up on just a couple points. First of all, why did you need 80 votes to get this done? And secondly, how did you end up getting across that 80 vote threshold that you needed to?
Well, so to your first question, in order to put the emergency clause on it, and the emergency clause allows the governor to sign it immediately and for it to go in effect in an abbreviated time frame, instead of have to wait all the way till July 1. But anytime you put an emergency clause, you have to have 80 votes in the House of Delegates in order to get that out. So that's why that threshold was so high. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
How did you end up?
How did we get there?
Yeah, how did you get over 80 votes?
Well, look, I think that there were some Democrats that genuinely understood that this was important, and while they might not have been getting everything they wanted, that was no reason to hold Virginia taxpayers hostage. I think the governor especially understands. The governor does not need to add one more scandal to the pile of scandals he has mounting up on his desk right now. And on top of all these issues with race, on top of the fact that him and his administration are just in complete disarray right now, I don't think he needed to add on top of that the fact that he wasn't going to allow people in Virginia to be able to effectively file their taxes. And then on top of that they wouldn't even be able to get the money back that was rightfully theirs. So I think he came to some realization that he did not want to fight us on this because we were absolutely determined to make sure that the money went back to the taxpayers.
Last question on this one, and just following up on the accusation that some of the Democrats aimed towards you, that this was somehow racist. I assume their argument was that the governor wanted to take the additional revenues that would have come from wealthier Americans because the deduction level had been lowered on their state and local taxes, and then give that to lower income folks, a certain percentage of whom would have been minority. I assume that's the argument they're coming with. Is that right, and what's your response to it?
No, I think that's pretty close to what they were suggesting. I think my response to it is, A, some of them got up there and made that argument and then turned right around and voted for it. So what does that say about what they really believe? And B, and what I think it does say about what they really believe is they know it's not true. They know that none of this is based off of racism. The only people right now having a problem with racism in the Commonwealth of Virginia are the governor and the attorney general. And I think a lot of us are just absolutely tired. We made a very, very simple argument. If you pay taxes and we're getting a tax cut, then we want you to have that tax cut. We're not the ones sitting here trying to divide up the population. We're not the ones trying to balkanize the Commonwealth of Virginia along racial lines, along gender lines. We're not doing that. We just simply said, if you have paid taxes, we want you to get a tax cut. But if you haven't paid taxes, well, then you can't get a tax cut. And that's what they need. They need to be more intellectually honest their side and really talk about what it is they want to do. They want to increase government spending. They want to increase wealth redistribution. They want to use the tax code to punish success, because the more money that they have in order to distribute to voters, the better it is for them politically. Now, as we've seen in every area where they've tried this, whether it's globally within the United States or even within the Commonwealth of Virginia, it never seems to work out for the people that they claim to want to help, but it always seems to work out for the politicians that get to hand it out. And so I have a real problem with the argument that they're using, and I'll probably be speaking on that tomorrow. Right now, I think what all of us wanted to do was just make sure that we were doing right by the taxpayers and get this conformity passed.
It's been quite a session in Virginia. Obviously, many folks know that before the Northam yearbook scandal popped up, he was under tremendous fire over his views on an abortion bill that would have pulled back on a lot of different restrictions. And he even went on the air and talked about steps that made it seem tantamount to infanticide. So you had the abortion bill, rescinding the right to work that Democrats wanted to do. They wanted a gun control bill. They wanted a $15 minimum wage. And I'm probably forgetting a few here. As far as I know, none of them got through because Republicans still control narrowly both chambers. But what does it tell you about where a Democratic governor and Democratic legislature would take Virginia?
Well, I think what everyone needs to understand at this point is that every single one of those bills, I mean, forget the committee structure for a while, every single one of those bills were ultimately one vote away from passing in each house. And you're right, it wasn't just one gun control bill. It was about 15 different gun control bills. And you're right, the abortion bill that they talked about, this was not something where the old Democratic Party used to say safe, legal, and rare. This was something where literally moments before birth, the child could be aborted for virtually any reason. And again, the way that Governor Northam described it, the child could actually be born, and in his words, the child would be kept comfortable while a conversation ensued. A conversation about what, Governor? Because at that point, we're talking about a child that has been born. I mean, look, I believe that life begins at conception. I believe we need to protect innocent human life. But I cannot believe that a governor who 3 or 4 years ago I would have told you was a pretty middle-of-the-road, moderate guy is now talking about something that does, I believe, meet the legal definition of infanticide. And so I think when we need to understand about the new Democratic Party, right, I don't want to throw all Democrats into this category because I don't think that's appropriate. But the new left that has taken over, that has become the thought leaders of the Democratic Party, they're terrifying. They honestly believe that because some people are maybe mad at Washington, D.C. or mad at Donald Trump, that this is just a blank check for them to take us on a path down something that is akin to socialism. It's about more government control. And it is absolutely terrifying along the full gambit of policy positions that we look at, be it economic, social, educational, transportation, whatever it is. You just need to understand that you have not seen the extent of the crazy that they will be able to bring to Richmond if they take control of the House of Delegates and the Senate next year. All of these bills that we've been able to kill that almost never see the light of day because we make sure that these bad ideas never even get close to passing. All of them will go through. It's not as if they're going to moderate their tone once they take power. Once they take power, they will double down on everything that they're doing.
You certainly have plenty of material for the campaign season this year, where every House seat and every Senate seat will be up for election. I was just learning last week that last week was what's known as crossover day. In other words, the House and the Senate had to pass all the bills that they're going to pass this year, and now they get pushed over, the House bills to the Senate bills to the House. So for the ones that got through, which ones do you like and which ones have you scared?
Well, I do think that the tax bill that went through is a good one, right? It can always be better. But I do think that was a solid one. I'm very happy with that. I think we got some of the school safety legislation out that's going to be very important in order to establish best practices. I had a bill that has gone through, and it looks like it's going to go all the way through with respect to school security officers. We had this kind of ridiculous restriction that if you wanted to be a school security officer, you could only apply if you were former Virginia law enforcement. So you could have literally been on a hostage rescue team with a federal agency, and you wouldn't have been able to be a school security officer. And as we're trying to fill these positions, it's really important that we make sure that anybody that's qualified is able to apply for that. So I think we've done a good job there on some of our regulatory policy. Delegate Michael Weber did a phenomenal job last year with the red tape reduction bill, and now we're starting to see some of the results of that, and additional legislation is going through in order to make sure that we can do that. We got some more property rights legislation through this year that I think was important. So, on the whole, I think it's been fairly strong. I mean, there's always going to be bills that get through that either raise a fee or a fine here or there, or increase regulations in a way that I'm not happy with. But I don't think there's been anything, especially horrendous. But that's only because we were able to stop those things either in committee or on the floor, and usually by the narrowest of margins. We had our own version of the Green New Deal that they tried to pass, that once we let it get to the floor, and we basically told them, said, okay, go ahead. If this is what you really think, then vote for it. And they can only muster 11 Democrats to vote for it. But I guarantee you they will all go back into their districts and campaign as if that's what they really want. So, but I think on the whole, we've done a fairly good job of making sure that the really bad stuff went away and getting some good solid legislation through. I was a little disappointed that my civil asset forfeiture reform bill didn't go through this year, but we'll be back again next year.
We're talking with Virginia Republican Delegate Nick Freitas, and in our last couple of minutes here, sir, let's get to the scandals. Governor Northam says he's staying in a couple of interviews. He says that Virginia needs to be healed, and a doctor's the perfect person to do that. Democrats, as far as I know, are still mostly calling for him to go, but there doesn't seem to be as much pressure on him to do so now that there are concerns about the lieutenant governor and attorney general as well. What do you expect to happen, and what do you want to see happen?
Like trying to predict which one of the executive branch is going to resign first or be removed from office first is something that they're probably taking bets from in Vegas right now. I'm not trying to jump involved in all of that. I will say this. I find it ridiculous that someone in 1984 didn't understand that it would probably be a bad idea, a very insensitive and racist idea to dress up as blackface or to dress up in a KKK hood, and then to have that proudly displayed within their yearbook, I think is just, horrible. And then for Attorney General Mark Herring to see that and then tell the governor that he should resign, only to find out days later that Mark Herring had a similar incident in his background. And now we have the accusations with Justin Fairfax. And when it comes to Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, I think it's important to mention something right here, because that was the only one that a Democrat called for the impeachment of. And as I look at the testimony being directed against Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, I find it very convincing. I find it very believable. But one of the things that I acknowledge is my belief in something is not sufficient evidence to convict someone. We have due process of law in this country for a reason. And let's face it, this would not be the first time a group of powerful white people decided to deny due process to a black man because they found him inconvenient. And so I don't think there's any wonder why there is a lot of African-American people within Virginia that are saying you've got a governor that has done blatantly racist things and clearly still has not come to grips with how bad it was. You've got an attorney general that has done the same thing and still has not come to grips with how bad it is. Then you have a lieutenant governor that's been accused, but to date we don't know that he did it. But that's the one that you're going to go after impeachment proceedings for. So I think that it is an absolute mess. From top to bottom. And I have to say the Republican caucus, our goal this whole time has been, we've got work to do. We have to get this tax policy passed. We have to govern. We have to go, especially now because the governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general are so mired in scandal that they're incapable of doing it effectively. And so I think we've stepped up. We've done our job. At the end of the day, we need to let the evidence, we need to let the facts speak for themselves. I believe that the women that have accused Justin Fairfax deserve to be heard. And if the evidence comes forward and Justin Fairfax is guilty of this, then yes, he should be impeached. And not only that, he should be in jail. But everybody is entitled to due process of the law. That's not just a convenient thing we throw out because the current lieutenant governor happens to be embarrassing the Democratic Party right now.
Exit question, Delegate Freitas. Certainly been a rough couple of weeks for Virginia's reputation. What do you want people to know about Virginia who probably didn't even think about the Commonwealth very much before the last few days?
Well, we're celebrating our 400th anniversary of the General Assembly this year. We are the oldest continuous elective body in the Western Hemisphere. There is so much to be proud of with respect to the Virginia General Assembly, with respect to our history, with respect to what Virginia represents, not only for ourselves, but to the country. You look at the Declaration of Independence, you look at the Constitution. These things were authored here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I do think we have an incredibly proud history, and we are not defined by the current occupants of the governors, lieutenant governors, and attorney general's positions. That's not what defines us as a Commonwealth. It's not what defines us as a people. So while it's frustrating, we're going to get through this because we are a proud Commonwealth. And we do have a great deal to be proud of. And I think as we go through this 400th anniversary and we look at our history, both the good and the bad, it's going to be a time for people to acquaint themselves with the real Virginia, not the scandal that you currently see with the executive branch.
Well, a busy agenda and a lot of controversy. I'm sure most of you would much prefer not happen right now. Delegate Freitas, thanks very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Virginia Republican Delegate Nick Freitas. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.